Hi, ArcfieldWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Tuesday morning, September 20th. A lot to talk about on the tropical scene. We, of course, have Hurricane Fiona, which continues to look like it'll take kind of a staying out to sea type of track. As far as the U.S. East Coast is concerned, it certainly could have a direct impact on some of the Canadian maritime provinces. And there's another tropical system that is of concern headed towards the Caribbean Sea. It looks like it could spill out over to the Gulf of Mexico probably in the latter part of next week, and certainly represents a threat for the Gulf of Mexico region, the southeastern U.S. at the end of next week. That's still a long way to go, but we'll talk about that as well. Here's the latest look at satellite imagery loop of the Atlantic Basin in what is known as a natural color band. These images from the College of DuPage weather website, and we can see the effects of the sunrise, and once the sun is revealed here, really shows some of the tropical systems right here. Fiona pounded away yesterday at Puerto Rico. Dominican Republic is now moved to the north-northwest, and it will continue to move on that kind of a track and then start to move more and more to the north and east, and we'll see in a moment here it could eventually get absorbed into a very deep upper level trough that will amplify over the northeastern part of the nation later this week. It'll bring the coolest air mass of the season so far to the Great Lakes, to the Mid-Atlantic region, to the northeastern part of the nation for the Friday, Saturday time frame, and that same upper level trough could act to push away the storm Fiona for the next few days from the U.S. East Coast. But again, late in the week and during the weekend, it could actually help to absorb it and have a potential impact in a weakened state to some of the Canadian maritime provinces. Meanwhile, here is the next big concern here. It's a wave getting itself organized. This is the entrance to the Caribbean Sea right here. It looks like it'll take this kind of a track into the Caribbean Sea, and ultimately could very well be a big concern in this part of the nation, anywhere from Florida to Louisiana, and really anywhere along the southeastern coastline. This could be a concern at the end of next week. There's another system way out here in the North Atlantic. No concern to any landmass right now. And yet another possible system here, at least an African wave moving out over the eastern part of the Atlantic. But here is Fiona as we begin the day here on Tuesday, and here is a potential concern for the southeastern part of the nation late next week. Well, here's the official positioning of the National Hurricane Center Fiona right here. This is Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Haiti, pounded away with heavy rainfall, powerful winds. Some reports, preliminary reports, of more than 20 inches of rain in Puerto Rico. It was moving northwest. Now it's north-northwest, and it'll continue to kind of make a curve to the north and east, and basically move past Bermuda, and then out in this fashion here, and certainly can have an impact as it tends to turn back towards the Canadian maritime provinces over the upcoming weekend, as that upper level trough initially keeps it away from the U.S. northeast coastline, but then tends to absorb it and pull it back in towards the Canadian maritime provinces. Here is the next potential big threat, something we'll have to watch over the next several days and really well into the next week. It could have a potential impact right in this part of the nation, maybe by the latter part of the next week. Whether or not it goes through this channel right here or over Yucatan Peninsula or over Cuba, way too early to tell, but there certainly are signs that it could be a strong system even after it passes over some of this land area in the Caribbean. But we're still many days away, but this is certainly looking like quite a potential big concern for the latter part of next week. This, no concern right now to land masses. It's out of the cooler waters of the North Atlantic, not near any land mass at this particular time. Well, before we take a look at the computer forecast model run from the GFS last night, let's take another look at the track as depicted by the National Hurricane Center and Fiona, very likely to become a major hurricane. In fact, it already has. Let me amend that. It already has reached major hurricane status as a Category 3 right now. It'll certainly have an impact on Bermuda, again turning from the north-northwest to north, and then to the north-northeast, and ultimately to the northeast. It starts to weaken. This H represents Category 1 or 2 hurricane status by the time we get to the early part of the weekend. And remember, at this time we've talked about a very intense upper level trough right in this part of the nation. By the end of the week, into the weekend, bringing the coolest air so far to the Great Lakes, the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic region, and it tends to pull this system back in over the upcoming weekend. This, by the way, is Nova Scotia and Newfoundland right here. So this Fiona system, albeit in a weakened state, certainly can have a direct impact on some of the Canadian maritime provinces over the upcoming weekend, as it tends to ultimately become absorbed by that upper level trough, pulled back in. It will be in a weakened state, but the good news is that it looks like it'll avoid any kind of a direct impact on the U.S. East Coast. Well, let's now walk through the 0Z run of the GFS. We're taking a kind of a broader view here, a North American view, because there are a lot of players on the field over the Atlantic Ocean, and in the middle of the U.S. we'll see an upper level ridge that will play an important role at the end of next week. So let's walk through the 500 millibar height anomaly forecast maps. As we begin the day here on Tuesday the 20th, here is the reflection of 500 millibars of Hurricane Fiona. Again, now sustained winds of 115 miles per hour. A little bit of a trough here over the northeastern part of the nation. We had a weak cool front that came through with a scattered shower or thunderstorm last night, came through the Mid-Atlantic region. Not a big change in temperatures. It'll be a rather warm day today and tomorrow. Now, let's move forward here. Again, Fiona takes that turn up to the north and the northeast. By the way, this little dot right here is the island of Bermuda. This is the Thursday midday forecast map. And look at this upper level system here, an upper level trough diving into the southeastern part of Canada, the northeastern part of the U.S. Certainly, it helps to turn this system away from the U.S. mid-Atlantic and northeastern coastlines during the mid and latter part of the week, and it ushers in the coolest air mass of the season so far. Places like D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, Boston on Friday. High temperatures confined to the 60s, and certainly the overnight lows can be in the 40s Friday night, for example, anywhere along that I-95 corridor region. So it keeps Fiona away from the U.S. northeast coastline, but then later on it tends to absorb it, pull it back in towards the Canadian maritime provinces right here. This is the Saturday morning forecast map. Again, we're looking at 500 millibar height anomaly, so that rather intense upper level trough strengthens with the influx of the energy from Fiona. And again, watch out up here in the maritime provinces of Canada over the upcoming weekend. Meanwhile, that next tropical system, reflection of it right here, 500 millibars early this weekend, and then we move forward here, and that system, again, it's way too early to say if this system will cross over Cuba, cross over the Yucatan Peninsula, or somewhere in between in this channel, staying over the water. An upper level trough, kind of a reinforcing cool shot, arrives early next week. We're talking a week away from right now. Next Monday night or Tuesday, a reinforcing shot of cool air. But notice this upper level ridge out here over the western part of Canada, the western part of the U.S. Ultimately, it plays an important role in this next tropical threat. Go through the middle part of next week, and here we go. We start to see this high pressure ridging at 500 millibars start to kind of expand to the east. Meanwhile, this particular system on this particular model run crosses over western Cuba, which can weaken a system. Cuba, like Hispaniola, has some high terrain, tends to weaken tropical system, but all signs right now point to, even if that were to happen, this system will maintain some strength and probably re-intensify after it moves out over the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico. Again, we're looking now at the middle and latter part of next week. And this particular model run, the important thing I want to point out here is this high pressure ridging that's starting to slide towards southeastern Canada. And anybody who's been watching my videos over the years knows that that's kind of a red flag. Whenever you have high pressure ridging this time of the year, build this way into the southeastern part of Canada or the northeastern part of the U.S., it kind of opens the door for tropical systems to impact the Bahamas, Florida, Gulf of Mexico, and Caribbean Sea. Again, you have this ridge building up into the northeastern part of the nation, southeastern Canada, and tropical system can certainly undercut that. Let's move ahead. Again, we're at the end of next week, and that ridge continues to push to the south and east, and we may have to deal with a tropical system of hurricane status at the end of next week. This is looking way ahead now to Friday, September 30th. Well, let's now take a look at the 850 millibar temperature anomaly pattern, because this too is quite an impressive cool shot coming into the northeastern part of the nation at the end of the week. And again, that reinforcing shot next week. Here, we start the day here on Tuesday, September 20th, with a lot of above normal conditions over the central U.S., near normal in the mid-Atlantic region, northeastern part of the nation. Again, we had a weak cool front pass through last night with a scattered shower thunderstorm. Not much relief in terms of temperature, and it really hasn't been that bad at all. Maybe highs of near 80 degrees today, for example, D.C., Philadelphia, New York City. Now let's move forward here rather quickly, and we'll see this next buildup of cold air by Thursday over the Great Lakes. I say cold, I mean quite cool for this time of the year, way below normal. Heads right into the Mid-Atlantic region. This is the Friday morning 850 millibar temperature anomaly forecast map from the 0Z GFS, and this is way below normal for this time of the year. We're talking highs maybe in the low to mid 60s, some places along, some of the urban places along the I-95 corridor region. The stiff north to northwest breeze as well will make it feel even cooler than that. Again, probably the coolest day. Friday still quite cool. On Saturday, Thursday will be the transition day, maybe with some showers and thunderstorms late Wednesday night into the day on Thursday in the northeastern quadrant of the nation. Let's move forward here, and I mentioned a kind of a reinforcing cool shot. Here we go at the end of the upcoming weekend, but here comes that next cool shot here right in the center part of the nation by next Monday, and then into the eastern U.S. by the time we get to the middle of next weekend. Remember, we talked about that high pressure ridging that expands from the western U.S., the western part of Canada, builds into the central states, central part of Canada, and then by the latter part of next week, it starts to push into the northeastern part of the new U.S., and with it, you'll see some temperatures getting back above normal, at least at the 850 millibar level, when the high pressure ridging starts to build into southeastern Canada towards the end of next week. Well, let's wrap up with the surface forecast maps from the 0Z operational run of the GFS. Here is the location of Fiona as we begin the day here on Tuesday, and it will continue to turn to take an out to sea type of track at least over the next few days, and at least with respect to the U.S. East Coast, staying well to the east. But then that upper level trough starts to build and amplify in the northeastern part of Canada. This system, let's backtrack a little bit. Watch it just get pulled back in towards the Canadian Maritimes. Again, this is, let's all go all the way out to Saturday morning. Here is Nova Scotia right here, Newfoundland right here. This system, whatever remains of Fiona, it'll still be a strong system one way or another. Whether it's still a hurricane at this particular time remains to be seen, but a powerful system gets absorbed back in by that amplifying upper level trough over southeastern Canada by the upcoming week, and could slam directly into some of those Canadian maritime provinces. Meanwhile, by the early part of the weekend, look at here, we have this next tropical threat here over the Caribbean Sea, and we've talked about how this is the climatological peak time period for the Atlantic Basin. One of the reasons that sea surface temperatures tend to increase throughout the month of July into August, and tend to reach a peak early part of September, maybe the middle part of September, and that is very warm water right now over the in the Caribbean, and that will certainly be a favorable factor for this next tropical system. Let's keep moving forward here. Again, this is now well out down in the kind of the speculation phase, but all signs point to this being a serious threat to monitor here over the next several days, indeed well into next week. This is now next Monday, and here we are, kind of a rather slow-moving type of tropical system right over the warm waters of the Caribbean Sea, headed towards the island of Cuba by the middle part of next week. And of course, this is way out in advance. There's no denying that it could end up going over the Yucatan Peninsula or even curve a little bit farther to the east, but it's certainly something to keep an eye on over the next several days. And then this particular model run has it spilling out over into the Gulf of Mexico by the latter part of next week. Here's surface high pressure over southeastern Canada. And again, we talked about any kind of high pressure building up in this region could allow for tropical systems to kind of undercut that upper level ridging. This is a surface high that we saw a moment ago, 500 millibar high as well. And that allows for tropical systems to head from the Caribbean into the Gulf of Mexico or southeastern U.S. And this is the area of concern towards the middle and latter part of next week. So a lot going on. Here we are at the climatological peak of the tropical season in the Atlantic Basin. Fiona continues an out-to-sea track over the next few days, avoiding any direct impact with the U.S. East Coast, but it certainly can have a direct impact in one form or another. Maybe a strong tropical storm, maybe a weak hurricane, Canadian maritime provinces by the upcoming weekend. Meanwhile, late next week, there's another threat, a tropical threat that certainly can push through the Caribbean Sea and into the Gulf of Mexico towards the latter part of next week. A long-winded video discussion, but that's it for now. I'm Arcfield Weather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian.